So hello and welcome to today's webinar, Unlock More Sales and Engagement with Text SMS Marketing. Thank you so much for joining us today. These days, pretty much everyone has a smartphone with them at all times. This really presents a valuable opportunity for businesses and organizations like yours to connect with customers in a number of ways: social media, email, and text or SMS. Each of these channels has unique aspects that make it worth having in your marketing toolbox. Social allows you to reach new people, but then of course there are algorithms that can limit your reach. Email gives you ownership of your audience and you can reach them on your terms, but you also have to compete for your readers' attention against competitors. SMS or text are personal and immediate. When someone receives a text, they usually look at it pretty quickly. But you also have to be careful not to abuse the connection, or otherwise you'll turn people off and they'll unsubscribe. In the end, it's the businesses that reach customers in the channels they prefer that win. And the businesses that figure out how to use these channels in concert in a way that enhances the customer experience, they're going to get the most out of all of these tools. These are the businesses and organizations that send the right message to the right people at the right time and in the right channel. Here at Constant Contact, we want to provide you with easy-to-use tools, guidance, and insights all in one place that allow you to communicate with your customers so that you're building relationships that matter most to your bottom line. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few stats. When it comes to text marketing specifically, we know that 91% of consumers are interested in signing up for texts. We also know that a cross-channel approach across all these different channels we just mentioned, they can boost your average user lifetime value by 76%, so they're with you longer. And according to our recent Small Business Now report, emails and SMS from small businesses are the two most helpful communications to consumers when they're making a purchase decision. So today we're talking all about SMS and including it in your marketing strategy. The thing to note with today's webinar is it's not a product demo, but it's going to reveal strategies, best practices, and tips to help you get the most from your SMS strategy. And the good news is I see Christian has already asked this question: when we'll be launching Constant Contact SMS tools, and we're launching those later this summer. Once the tool launches, we're going to be hosting another webinar that provides a demo. Let's take a look at our agenda and see more specifically what we're going to cover today. We'll start with the do's and don'ts of text marketing. We'll talk about growing your list so that you can grow your business. And we'll talk about creating a positive and effective customer experience. And this is where we'll provide lots of examples of ways that you can use SMS and some tips to make sure you're getting the most out of the messages that you're sending. Before we get into the details, allow me to more formally introduce myself and my guest for today. My name is Stephanie French, and I'm the Senior Producer of Webinars here at Constant Contact. And I'm very excited to bring on Dave Charest. He is the Director of Small Business Success here at Constant Contact. And I'll have you hop on and just say a quick hello.
Hi, everybody. Hopefully, Steph, you can hear me right?
Yep, you sound great.
Yeah, good. We're connecting a little bit differently here today. I'm actually in New York right now. We're going to be attending the Small Business Expo tomorrow. So if anybody's in the Manhattan area, come on out. It's a free event. You can find that online, the Small Business Expo. I'll be doing a keynote there, and so we've been running around trying to get into rooms and find places where I can jump on this webinar here with you today, and I'm super excited. So Steph, thanks for having me. Excited to talk about SMS, and actually maybe I could tell a little story because I had a personal experience with SMS recently that I thought was pretty cool. So I recently took my family to go see Paul McCartney out in Boston, which is where I'm from. And before Paul came out, as you can see here on the stage, he had these things on the screen that said, text me. And he had a phone number there that, of course, you could text to, message Paul. So of course, I'm gonna text message Paul McCartney. I mean, who wouldn't, right? And so you send a little message off, and you're like, "Hey, Paul," and you get this thing back. You're like, "Oh, it's Paul," right? That's my really bad Paul McCartney impression. Sorry for that, everyone. But you get this message from him, and then he asks you to add himself, like, and confirm that you actually want to receive these things. And then you kind of get this stuff that we'll talk about later that confirms that you're on the list. But I just wanted to call out a couple of things here. One, just notice how personal the communication here is, right? It's as if it's, coming from Paul. Obviously, we know it's not coming directly from Paul, but it has that conversational tone because what it is, it's a very conversational channel, right? And what we thought was amusing was there was a woman in front of us, and because it was a Paul McCartney concert, and he's 80 years old now, still going strong, which was amazing. But the people there, of course, were older, and this woman had her text, you can change the font size on the thing, and it was this giant text, and so we could literally see that she was messaging Paul with this whole diatribe of like, hey, I came in with these people, and my son and his wife were supposed to come, but they couldn't make it, and like, you're just having this whole thing where we were cracking up because it was just like this whole very personal story that she was just sending off to Paul. And I share that story just to highlight, like, one, obviously it's another great channel for you to use, and if you use it the right way, it's this very personal thing that just by the nature of the channel itself, people feel very personal when they are using it and trying to communicate with you. And so just something to keep in mind as we get into the details and some best practices here today. But again, thanks for having me, and I'm glad we're here to talk about this.
That's a great story. And you'll notice the personalization that Dave was talking about. It's going to be a theme as we're going throughout today, especially in the tips and best practices. So before we dive in too much, I want to go ahead and launch a poll. So on your screen, you should be seeing a poll here any second. The question is, which channels do you prefer businesses to communicate with you? And this is a choose all that apply. Do you like email, social media, or SMS or text? And I see Steve is asking, what's SMS? SMS stands for short message service, which is basically texting. That's all we're talking about today. So great question there. So we'll give everyone just a minute or two to go ahead and provide your answers to us. I see so far 86% of you are saying email. Email is a big important tool when it comes to marketing, and it's very effective with an ROI probably around 36% in terms of what you put in and what you get back out of it. So it's very important there. 31% of you so far are saying social media. 52% of you are saying SMS, which is great because that's what we're talking about today. And you'll notice it's just a very personal channel, and it also drives great results as well.
Yeah, I love the stuff that, obviously, like email, like we believe obviously email is still king, right? But as you're starting to see here, some people prefer different channels to be contacted or to get messages from people. And then as you mentioned at the beginning here, it's really all about those businesses that find ways to use, and we'll talk about this here today, but really use the uniqueness of each of these channels in a way to use them in concert, as you said, and good reference with the Paul McCartney thing here. So like to use those in a way that complement each other and really use the strengths of each of those things. And so that's really good to see here that there's as you said, right now we're at 83%. For email, SMS comes in next, which is great at 49 we're looking at, and then 30% social. So yeah, as you can see, right, people really have their preferences across the things, but also if you have good reasons for people to subscribe in all of these ways, which is ultimately what we want, right? So we want our businesses to be top of mind in all the ways that we can, that this is just a great opportunity. So good to see you there.
Yeah, definitely. The answers there don't really surprise me. I mean, email and SMS, if you want to get a message across to me, those are very important channels and both things I'm going to pay attention to. Social media is great too, but then like we said, you're competing with the algorithms there, which can limit the reach and everything like that. And the other thing to take out of this is you all have your different answers. Everyone has their own preferences, and in many cases, people will follow you in many channels. And I saw Christian was saying in the chat window, you forgot none of the above. So Christian doesn't like to be communicated with, period, which is interesting. But let's go ahead and dive back in here. So as we mentioned, all of these channels are really going to have their own strengths for when you want to use them and what you want to send. SMS is another channel that you do want to add to your marketing mix. And oftentimes when we're introducing a new channel like this or starting to talk about it more, people often get the misconception that, oh, I should use SMS versus email now or versus social media. But really it's about using them together. Because when you combine SMS with your email and your social media, like we said, you're offering options for your customers to connect with you in the channels they prefer. So let's have you talk about these different channels, what's best for each of these channels and when we'd want to use them.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, I actually see a question in here from John, and John points out a really great question, which is part of what we're here to talk about here today, right? Is there a way to make SMS be less intrusive and less annoying than it is, right? And really, it's not the channel that's annoying, it's how people use it that is annoying. And hopefully we'll give you some tips or some things to think about here. Again, the differences between all the channels and how you use them to complement each other. And so great question there, John, and hopefully as we talk through some of this here, that'll help with that. And so, of course, there are times, right, where you're going to want to use one channel over the other, and it's more appropriate. And then there are those times where they can really be used together. And so when you start thinking about what are the strengths of each channel, right, obviously we have social media. And this is really great when you're trying to get beyond your email list or your SMS list for that matter, right? This is where you're really trying to look to increase engagement with people in a social setting, right? You're doing this in public so that you're able to reach a new audience, right? Because when the people that you're already connected with start to interact with you, usually they're connected with people that make good prospects for your business as well. And so that's really what you're trying to do there. And you're able to kind of do those things that are more engaging and have conversations back and forth. And again, people see those things, right? And so that's really the strength there. And of course, the limitation there, of course, is that you are at the behest of algorithms that are going to limit your reach and that type of thing. Now, as we move to email, this is where you're able to reach your audience directly. This is where you have the ability to have a more robust message to share, right? You can have images, you can have formatting, and you can provide more detail. And also a way to think about the difference here between these two, and I often use this reference, is that like if you think of social media like a big party, right, where you go to this thing and everybody's there, and then usually when you're at a party, right, you find those people that you connect with, right, the people that you're like, oh, these are fun people to hang around. I'm gonna be with this group of people at this party, right? And then you typically, if you were to say like, hey, let's have an after party, right? You kind of weed out the people you don't want to hang out with, and you find those people, and that's like inviting them to your email list, right? And it's like then you have that after party, and if we move into the strength of SMS, if you want to follow this analogy a little bit more, right? SMS is like those people that you want to stay in touch with even more, right? These are the people that you're gonna like be more social with or connect with more often, right? And so, or you want to do that, right? Not that you'll necessarily text them all the time, but it's just a different level of the relationship here, right? And so this is where you start thinking about SMS, where the strengths of that are, again, as you mentioned at the beginning, Steph, is this is where people are, if you get a message, right, like luckily right now I have, notifications turned off, right? But if that's going to get your attention right away, right? And you're going to pretty much look at that, right? And so it's really good for those time sensitive types of things. And one of the ways you want to start to think about how do you to use that in a way that is not going to be annoying is think of some exclusivity there, right? Like one, is it time sensitive? And then two, is it something that being on that list or being the ability for people to text or receive text from you, like what are you going to offer them that's a little bit different and not something that they're going to get everywhere else, right? It starts to become really annoying when you are saying on social media, hey, here's our big sale on this. And then you get an email and here's our big sale on this. And then the SMS is like, here's our big sale on this, right? It's the same message. Well, if you're going to send me the same thing in every place, well, I don't really have a reason or a purpose to be connected to you in all of those things, right? And that's when it starts to get annoying. And so what we want to do is, of course, right, SMS is more for that short message too. So you want to think about what can be handled there, right? But if you think about how you can start to use these things together in support of a campaign, let's say, right? And so, for example, maybe on social, right? Again, we're talking about that being an engagement channel. And so you're starting a conversation around a particular topic on social that is, again, for that purpose, to stimulate engagement, to get people engaging and talking and acting and thinking about something, right? And then maybe in an email, you can either reference that discussion that's happening on social, and then maybe you can talk about that a little bit more in detail. And so you're kind of tying and weaving these things together, right? And then SMS could be when you use that channel to call attention to something that's more pressing or something specific related to that campaign in SMS, right? And so that's just kind of one example how you start to weave these different channels together and use that to support your business and support the message or the campaign that you're trying to get out there, right? And so this way you're really using the strengths of each of these channels to really provide a unique experience for your audience, and it gives you more opportunity to stay top of mind, and of course ultimately drive more engagement and sales, and do so in a way that's not just same message, same message, same message.
Agreed. Got to harness those powers of each channel. So let's go ahead and dive in, and let's start by learning the do's and don'ts of text marketing. Just like with email marketing, there are laws and regulations around SMS, which I saw somebody asked a little bit earlier. The good news is that when our tool launches, it's going to make it easy for you to get permission and provide the necessary information that helps you to stay compliant. So Dave, please tell us about the important aspects when it comes to getting people to opt in.
Yeah, well, just like email, right? You know, you mentioned $36 for every dollar spent when you're using email, and really the reason, and I will support this wholeheartedly, is the main reason why email works so well is because it's what we call an opt-in channel, right? People raise their hands and they say, yes, I want you to send me those messages. And it's the same thing with SMS, right? You don't want to just, well, I'll save that for the don'ts, right? But like, really, you want to give people that opportunity to say, yes, I want to receive those messages. And just like the Paul McCartney example, yeah, I messaged Paul and was like, yeah, I want to get some text. And then I confirmed that that's what I wanted to do, right? And so you're letting people opt in for one. People are always going to be more engaged if they have that opportunity versus, right? Just think about, go back to email, for example, or let's even go to text messages. You get these spam messages on your SMS and it's like, okay, block that contact, right? Because people just start texting you out of the blue, right? You don't want that to happen, right? And so you want people to be looking forward to receiving those messages. And so then you want to have people confirm their participation, right? And so as you can see that example on there, it's like, okay, you've confirmed, right? And then you want to make sure you send back to them. And then this is where we get into the legalities of some things. There's like disclaimers and things that you're going to want to include, which are making sure that it has your company name, right? So people recognize that this is you that it's coming from, or this is the business that it's coming from. Hopefully you can actually get them to add that message to your contacts and name it so they can see that more than just a number when it comes through. But it's going to have your company name, of course. You've got to let them know kind of like an expected frequency of messages that you're going to be sending to them. You also want to let them know that message and data rates you have to have that disclosure in there, at least on the onset, to let them know that, they may be responsible for charges depending on the plans that they have with the particular carrier. And then you also, just like email, you want to give them the option to be able to unsubscribe. And that means you can just reply with the word stop, and then that will remove you from that list. And then if you ever have questions about what you can do in this interaction, you can type the word help and it'll give you kind of the commands that allow you to do things. And then, it's really just, just being able to confirm or make sure that you can opt out of that subscription. That's really important here. A couple of other things to think about is that, there are disclaimers and things like that, and that is more on the sign up side of things, right? You want to let people know that there's a privacy policy, there's terms and conditions that you should be letting people know about. And then, of course, on those forms and with Constant Contact, you'll use a sign-up form that is what we call a landing page, right? A lead capture landing page. And you'll have that information in there, and people will go to that form to put their stuff in. And we'll see an example a little later on. But when you put that information in, you want to provide all of this information or legally stuff, as I like to call it, right, that you'll need to have there as well. And so those are the types of things, and then just setting expectations, right? It's all about, if you think, it's a lot similar to what you're doing with email, right? Where you want to give them a reason to sign up and you want to set the expectations when they're doing that. Same thing here. It's just a different channel, right?
Great, thanks, Dave. And if you're someone who needs to create a terms of service for when these tools launch, we've got a link that Dallas, who's helping behind the scenes, will share in the chat window, and it'll help you out with that in terms of creating that policy. An important don't to think about here is just because you have someone's phone number, don't just simply add them to your SMS list. You need them to opt in. They need to know what they're getting into. And also with these expectations, how many times you're sending and what you'll be sending in those channels. Let's talk about some do's and don'ts for actually sending those messages. So you've mentioned having a business name in there, but what else needs to be in all of our messages?
Well, we mentioned again that idea of you're going to make sure people have that ability to opt out, and then you also want to keep the door open for people to return. And so typically what will happen, and I'm sure some of you have experienced this on your own side as a consumer, where if you text the word stop, you'll get a message that's like, okay, you've been removed from this list, but if you ever want to come back, and so for example, with Constant Contact, you can send the word unstop, right? And then that will get people to re-add you, and you can be able to send text messages to them again. And of course, they can always just go back and sign up again at that landing page, right? But so you want to do some things there when you're thinking about that, of course. You also really have to be mindful of time, and because there are laws in place that between 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. local time are the only times that you're actually able to send these messages. And so anything outside of that is considered a violation of like what the terms are, right? And so here's a quick tip for you. You don't want to rely on area codes for the send time, because oftentimes, people will relocate. So somebody could have a number from the East Coast and then move out to the West Coast. And so you can't really rely on that. And I think, Steph, I think you have a little bit more information on how kind of we handle that. So you're not really relying on, there obviously is a sway in time there. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so with the Constant Contact tools that we'll be releasing, the messages can only be delivered between 11 a.m. Eastern Time and 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And that just limits you having to think and figure out what the time zone might be for certain people based off of their address or anything like that. So you'll only be able to send between 11 Eastern Time and 8 Eastern Time, 8 p.m., in order to accommodate for those different time zones. All right, so let's move on and talk about actually getting people on your SMS list. When you've got a great way to contact customers, you have a way to influence sales or donations, and SMS can certainly help to support your bottom line. So growing your list is going to be very important and also very similar to what you do in email marketing. So I'll have you kick us off and talk about some of the different ways we want to think about for growing an SMS list.
Yeah, big thing, as with any list growth activity, right, you have to ask. And that means you want to do that across, we break this down into 3 different ways, right? In-person, in-print, and online, and we'll talk about in-person here first, right? And so, if you have a physical location or you're at an event or whatever the case may be, you're helping a customer, these are all the places that you want to be able to do that. You can even marry that with print materials, right? If you're at an event or you're at the store, you're hanging signage in your store to let people know that they can join your list and how they can do that. QR codes are a great way to be able to point people to the landing page where they can just use their phone and sign up and subscribe to that, right? And so that's the in-person piece. Then, of course, if we go to print materials, right, I mentioned signage in your store or at events, that's a great way to do it. But then also, if you're doing print materials or doing direct mail, right, include those on flyers and brochures and things like that, and try to offer something just like anything else where people are going to get some value in exchange for giving you that information. And then online, of course, right? And so, we talked about, you want to make sure on your website you're giving people the opportunities to be able to join your SMS list. On social media, obviously, you don't want everything to be about joining the list, but ultimately, as I mentioned, you want to try to move people over to that next thing, right? Where people can, move from social media to that after party, and then hopefully to that, hey, close contact list, right? And so, and then, think of things like your email signature, right? Include a link to your landing page. You have landing pages on here online, right? Where it's just another name for a sign up form, right? Where people can enter their information and sign up for your SMS list. And so really it boils down to, again, asking and then thinking in person, in print materials, and online, all those places that you have interactions with customers or potential subscribers, those are the places that you want to be asking.
Absolutely. And you want to think about your existing email list, because you can move those people over into your SMS list as well. Just by simply sending an email saying, hey, we're going to be sending SMS messages, and then we're going to talk about some tips here in a second. Offer something of value in exchange for them being in that channel. Let them know what the expectations are. So of course, you've got to have a reason or a way to entice people to join your mailing list. There are three main reasons that people typically will subscribe. They either want to sign up to receive promotions and discounts, or they want to sign up to receive exclusive content. Maybe the content within your SMS messages is the valuable content itself that they're signing up for, or maybe right after signing up, they want to receive an ebook or a guide or a list of tips of something to do in relation to your product or your service or your organization. Or they simply sign up to show support for your business or organization. This is something that I do on the regular, and I know many other people that will do this as well. The end result here is when you're creating a sign up form or you're asking in any of those different buckets, those three buckets that Dave was talking about, put that in your mention or on your form. What are they getting in exchange for signing up for your list? And Dave, you've got some best practices you want to talk about here. I'll let you take that away.
Yeah, so we talked about a few of these things a little bit earlier, right? Just in terms of like when somebody's confirmed a subscription, and I talked about it briefly. But one, I think I'll start with this idea of, as with anything, you're always going to get better results when you're thinking about what's in it for the person giving you that information, right? So what are they getting in exchange for giving that information or that data to you, right? And so again, think of what can you offer them in exchange. And you'll see a lot of, like, if we think about e-commerce, for example, right, you'll see a lot of sites are, will give you kind of like an extra added like discount or something like that if you give both your email and your text message, right? And so you want to think about what's in it for them. And you mentioned some of the reasons why people subscribe, and it's quite similar with SMS as well. The other thing that you want to make sure that you're doing is you're setting those expectations with people, right? And so you're letting people know that, if you sign up for this list, you'll probably get a few text messages a month for us, or if you're doing more than that, because again, it really varies depending on the nature of your business and the audience that you're attracting. And so, often with email, we talked about the idea of like, there are some businesses that it makes perfect sense to send an email every single day. Whereas I just said that out loud, someone probably heart stopped a little bit going every single day, right? But it doesn't make sense for your business, right? It makes more sense to do that once in a while. And so then the other thing here is that this is what I was talking about before, is you got to remember to have those disclaimers on there. And so once you set this up, again, with Constant Contact, it'll have that information on there for you, and you'll be able to provide those links. And I think Dallas sent out a link to some of those resources to help you think through that. But you got to have that privacy policy on there. You got to have your terms of service. You got to have all of that stuff on there. And then we make it easy for you to provide that right on those forms.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and move on, and let's talk about how to create a positive and effective customer experience. I've seen someone just asked about B2B examples for SMS. We have some of those we're going to talk about in a minute, as well as some other types of businesses and organizations and what you might want to consider sending, plus some tips all along the way. So I want to run another poll here. So the poll question is, how quickly do you open a text message that you receive from a business or nonprofit? Is it 1 minute or less, 2 to 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, or I get to it when I get to it?
So I know I'll speak for myself here, Steph, is I know, like I said, like we're all kind of glued to this device
Yep.
and we have it. And if you have notifications on, like the minute you get something, like I typically, I don't know about anybody else, but I typically will turn off notifications for most apps and things like that. Like I typically don't get those, but one of the ones that I always leave on is obviously text because like I know those are the immediate messages that I want to get. And so, that's one of those things that I'm definitely looking at, right away if I'm right near my device. And then if I'm not, I have a watch that also lets me know I just got a text, right? So I'm usually looking at it pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would say I'm in the same boat in the 1 minute or less, unless for some reason my phone is across the room or something like that, so I can really focus on something. So I see most of you, 48% of you that have voted say I get to it when I get to it. 16% are saying 1 minute or less. 27% of you are saying 2 to 5 minutes. So I see a good amount of you have voted, which is awesome. Thank you for participating with us. And so we'll just see the final results there on the screen. So this is a little bit interesting, Dave, in terms of some stats that we've seen in the past. Some of the stats we've seen have shown that about 90% of text messages are read within 3 minutes of delivery. So thinking about your typical audience, I would say most of your audience is probably in that 1 minute or less, that more immediate category. But the thing to note here, and a theme that you're going to see in all of the examples as well as the tips today, is that timely and relevant messages are going to be so, so important to you.
Yeah, Steph, I just wanted to add here, I actually think this is good for this group that's joining us here today because I'm going to make the assumption that most of you are business owners, and that means you're tending to your business and not glued to your device, right? Like most people are. So I think good on you that
Yeah.
you are like, that's the type of thing you're going to get to when you get to it, right? Because you have more important things to do. But when you think of, consumers, oftentimes they're not always in that same position, right? And so it's always a good idea to be open to the idea that people want to receive these things from you. I've talked to many many business owners who are like, why would anybody want to even just receive emails from me, right? But like the fact is, people do, and you need to not use your own predilections towards something to sway you, but actually pay attention to what people want from you. And so, yeah, I think that's a really interesting outcome there. But I think good on the fact that people have other things that they're paying attention to.
Yes, I love it. That's a great point, Dave. All right, so let's talk about some examples for retail, because in order to keep your customers on your SMS list and responsive, you've got to make sure you're providing value and keeping them happy all along the way. So I'm going to let you take this one away and kick us off with some examples for retail.
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things to first think about, and we're kind of talking about these a little bit in isolation right now, but again, I want you to think about how you use those in conjunction with the other messages and the other channels that you're using. But, in particular for SMS, we mentioned the idea of it being it's very timely and instant kind of gratification channel, right? Where people are looking at that message right away. And so it's really good for sending out information, particularly exclusive stuff that is like a timely, like think of a flash sale or something like that, where you've got a discount or something. Like I'm thinking of, there's some brands I purchased some things for that, you just did a flash sale on a particular item that, oh, it would have been great to get a text about that because that's one of those things that I would have wanted to take advantage of right away, right? And so sales, of course, are important and information about those discounts and that type of thing. Another thing to think about is particularly when you start connecting, or if you're in the e-commerce space and you're using a tool like Shopify, for example, you can even use that to send and you can start to automate that process too with a tool like Shopify, where you're sending those cart abandon reminders, right? If somebody leaves something in their cart, hey, you can pick up where you left off, that type of thing. And then, another example would be, I love this actually, if you've got something new coming, I always like to think of, again, that exclusivity of the channel and how can you let these people know that have, taken that step to be more connected with you? How can you let them know first about something, whether that's a product release or maybe it's even an item back in stock? And I think, Steph, you have an example of that as well on the next little thing here, I believe. There we go. Yeah. So, that could be something like that you're letting people know about, particularly when it's a hot item or something like that. And you let those people know first, so they have the first chance to act on that stuff because it's a timely thing, right? Some other ideas, of course, you could use it as a way to build anticipation for something, or maybe there's a seasonal product or something that you only have at a certain time of year. You can just, kind of tease that a little bit. Also, just welcoming people, of course, when they first sign up to that list and starting to nurture and build that relationship too. So you want to think about that a lot similarly to how, like, people, when they join your email list, you want to welcome to that and let them know what to expect there. And then, it could even be if you've got somebody that's had a really great experience with you, or that they've purchased an item that usually gets really great reviews. You can even shoot them a little message that says, hey, we'd love if you kind of, send us some feedback on that purchase and leave a review for us. And so those are just some examples of ways you can use that in the retail space.
Great. Let's talk about some examples for those of you who are in the real estate world. You could use SMS for sending information on your new listings. You could invite people and provide information for your upcoming open houses. Remind them that you have an open house at a particular listing. And you can even send price change alert. That's this example here on the right side of this screen. But you could also send some status change alerts. Keep people up to date on what's happening with particular properties, if they go under contract or if they're sold, and that way people aren't thinking about buying that house or that property if it's already off the market. You can also use it to welcome and nurture your new leads. That's a great way. Of course, relationships are important in any industry, but especially for those of you in the real estate world. You could send it for, or use SMS for invitations and reminders for your client appreciation events. And of course, asking for a client review or a feedback request. Again, those relationships are very important. And then, of course, I saw someone was asking about nonprofits too, and we'll have Dave walk through these examples.
Yeah, sure. So, first and foremost, having been in the nonprofit world in a previous life, I know the things happen. Again, we're talking about timeliness here, right? And the importance of that, where, I used to work for nonprofit theater, and, there would be like, we need to do something with the set, or we need somebody to help us move something, right? And just think of being able to, you have a list of volunteers that you could quickly send out a mass, text to everyone to let them know about a particular opportunity, right? That's a great way to be able to, because it's timely, and get in front of people right away, again, on a device where, they have it with them on the go, and you don't have to wait for them to check their email or do something like that. Obviously, fundraising are interesting ways to start to think about, like, how you would use that, and how you would, highlight, the ways for people to donate to a particular campaign or something that you're doing. And then even just announcements or event reminders, or even just thank yous, right? Like, I think, again, it's not always about selling something all of the time. It's about building those relationships and making those connections, so that, right, you have an easier chance of being able to sell something in the future. And so, or get donations or whatever it may be. And so even just like, let's say people came to an event, and sending a quick email at the end of the night or something like that, if it's within the right time, of course, right, where you could just say thank you for coming, right? And it doesn't have to be anything more than that, but just was really great to see you. Thank you for being there, right? We appreciate your support. Those are all just really great ways that feel personal and help to start to build those connections. I mean, if we go beyond just the examples we have on the screen here, right, we're talking about, right, you can alert people to things. Like, oftentimes an interesting way to start to think about this is, particularly if you have, let's say you had something that went out that was important information to your cause, and something that your supporters care about, and maybe you sent more information in a newsletter or something like that. It could be a good way to alert them and point them to, hey, there's something really important in the newsletter that's coming out later today that are just hit your inbox. Please check it out and let us know, if you can help or support us in that way. Again, if you've got big news or a notification about your particular cause, there's an opportunity to do that. And then, this isn't necessarily pertaining to nonprofits specifically, but I did see some questions coming through for other industries, and we may not have examples for every industry here, but it's really thinking about things a little bit differently, and how could you use this ability to Again, do so in a way that's not going to ruin it, right? Where you're not annoying people or whatever, but you're helping them. You're adding value to what that interaction and engagement is through that channel. And so, you know, whatever industry you're in, maybe there's something that people are super passionate about within your industry, right? And maybe it's like I'm thinking of examples here, like maybe there's inspirational messages that you send to people, right? On every once in a while or something like that, or or thinking like maybe even like health and fitness, or even if it was a nonprofit that focused on health and fitness, right? You could send out reminders about healthy habits or something like that, right? And so you can really use that as a way to just be like, hey, here's something that you should know or think about. And so just think about, even if we're talking about nonprofit, or we're talking about retail, or we're talking about B2B, or service type businesses, think about like, okay, if you did that there, what could be some way that I could use something similar for what I do in my particular industry, right? And don't so you need to kind of pull from that, or think about other industries to figure out a new way that could be something that you use for your particular industry. So I just wanted to point that out as well.
Great points there and great examples for nonprofit. And Sharon, I see your question as well as probably a few others. Yes, we've got some examples for those of you in the B2B world or business to business world. So some examples here: event or training announcements or reminders. Dave, this is something we could even do for our webinars, like reminding someone via text an hour before this webinar goes live, or a half hour, and say, hey, we're going live in a few minutes. Don't forget to attend the webinar. Another thing that you can think about is maybe a reminder to schedule a consultation. Maybe you need to provide a service review for your clients. If your business does a call where you review the results and services on the regular, this could be something that's really great for you. Also, when you're announcing a new service, that can be something that you can share there as well. And of course, asking for reviews is great for your industry as well. And I saw someone, I think it was Joe, who was asking about service-related industries, and these types of things can be applied there. Asking someone after their limo ride to give you a review or provide feedback, announcing when you're offering a new service, or if you're able to now travel to a new location for the special events like weddings and things like that. So we've got a few tips to kind of wrap this up that will help to keep your messaging on track. We've seen a few things that'll kind of roll up into this, but let's talk about these tips so that we can make sure everyone is on the right track.
Yeah, so the big things here, of course, are right. You always have to identify yourself in that text, and so you can see the example there on the screen. It says ABC Garage Door, so they know the business that it's coming from, and they know that's a trusted business, right? Again, you want to stay timely and relevant. As with anything in marketing, it's always going to work better when it is timely, based on things about that particular customer or the group of customers that you're emailing. So you also want to think about segmenting here as well. You don't want to just mass text everyone, right? The more you can do to segment and have more relevant messages to the right people are going to get you better results. Same with anything else, right? Marketing is always best when you're consistent, right? So social, you're always going to be more frequent. Emails maybe a little less frequent. Again, it always depends on the nature of your business. So I don't want to ever say never, right, with anything, because it could mean you're sending a lot. It could mean you're sending a little. It really depends, right? And then, but at the end of the day, you really want to think about at least having some consistency. We always recommend at least once a month, because it's not too much time in between where people get confused or like, what the hell is this, right? That type of thing. And so the other thing, so this is the thing that I used to really love about Twitter, because it was kind of like it started as a text service, right? Where you were constrained to 160 characters, right? That's including spaces. And I think I actually like this, right? I think this is good, because I think we can all be probably long-winded, as I'm probably rambling on about things right now. But if I had the ability to write it down and then go back and edit it and then force it into 160 characters, it actually forces me to be more concise, obviously, but also more pointed about the words that I'm using and what I'm trying to convey and trying to get that message across, right? And so you have to think about that experience as well. And then again, just I'll add one other thing here is just, again, think about that across all of the things that you're doing and how is this an additive channel and not just a parrot of what you're doing someplace else.
Great point. So just a few notes there and some examples. When it comes to being timely and relevant, it's great for keeping people updated on current events. Like one example where I think we would use SMS is, let's say you have a big snowstorm roll through and you have to close for the day, things like that. Also, my husband and I own a garage door company, and we're planning to put SMS in place once it's launched here in order to ask for reviews from our customers. When we have a great interaction with someone and we know they're happy right in front of us, that's great because once we get their approval, of course, to add them to our SMS list, we can send them a message and say thank you, and then ask them to leave us a review because we know for our business, reviews are so valuable to us, and we can send that there shortly after the interaction. A few other tips that you want to remember are be exclusive. People have to have a reason to be in this channel, so you don't want to repeat everything. If you're sending an email every time, let them know that the email was sent. You can do that, and I would say maybe think about doing that across all of the different channels. Let's say you have a big important event coming up, but don't do it every single time and parrot what's being said in those other channels. That also means you've got to bring value. We've got a great example here on the screen from a salon, and they're providing a link for some great hairstyle ideas. I know in my own text message inbox, unfortunately, I'm seeing lots of businesses doing this all wrong. It is sale after sale or buy this or buy this. That's not a great way to keep people on your list because unfortunately, even though I'd like to, I can't buy a new shirt or a new pair of shoes every single day or even every single week. My house isn't big enough for that. Neither is my bank account. You've got to be personal. So in a lot of cases, you can use their name when you can fit it into the 160 characters, but that also comes into this part about being conversational because you want your messages to feel like you're talking one-on-one with someone, not like you're sending a mass message to everyone. So that goes back to the whole idea of your messages being relevant in the first place. Because if you've got, say, a pet store and I have a dog and you're sending me messages about a fish or a cat, I'm not going to pay attention to that and I might just simply unsubscribe. So the tip here is to make it feel like you're talking directly to people. So the last tip we have for everyone here today is to measure what works and fix what doesn't. So what are some key metrics that we should be paying attention to for SMS?
Well, of course, we're going to want to look at like list growth, right? Are people actually signing up for those, right? It's good to start to see what your audience is interested in, right? If they're looking at that or they prefer that channel. Also, too, it helps you gauge whether or not you're making the right thing to entice them to sign up for that list. So you want to be cognizant of that. Then, of course, you're going to start thinking about, who's actually clicking through on some of the things that you're sending. And then what are the conversions that are actually coming from that particular channel? And so are people doing those things that you want them to do or you're asking them to do? And obviously it's a little easier to track that when you're thinking about an e-commerce situation where somebody actually buys something at the end, but there's also, right, did people volunteer? Did people come? Did people do that thing? Did they call you? Whatever the case may be. And so really overall, though, those are some individual things that you can start to look at. But overall, really, you want to start to attribute the click-throughs that are coming from those SMS messages and those text messages to the sales or to those actions that you want people to take, and then see how the value of that particular channel or that touch point stacks up against the other channels that you're using, right? So you can start to get a good mix of, hey, I know if I do this on social, this type of thing will happen. If I do this with my email, this is the type of result that I can expect. And then if I'm doing this with my text messages or SMS, here's what I can expect there, and then see how those all kind of work together. So you want to kind of look at everything holistically and not, just be blinded into just the channel itself.
Definitely. And as you're getting started, start to pay attention to metrics like this and create a baseline for yourself. Then as you start to move along in your SMS journey, start to make some changes and see if you can better affect that click rate or that conversion rate and get people to take more actions with your messages. There we go. So we're in a good place. Let's go ahead and start to wrap up so we can get to all of these great questions, Dave. I think we probably have over 100 questions that have been coming in here, which is awesome to see the excitement and all the great interest in SMS. So a few things to remember. There are several rules and regulations that you need to follow. I've seen a few misconceptions coming up in questions here. Don't just add someone to your SMS list because you have their phone number. You need them to opt in. Otherwise, it's going to cause trouble for you and it's not going to be effective in the first place. And remember, an SMS platform like the one that will be launching later this summer is going to help you to stay compliant in so many ways. You just need to make sure you're following those rules and getting people's permission. There are various places that you want to make sure you're asking people to join your SMS list. Remember, you want to ask people in all of your in-person interactions. Put that information on your print materials and in all of your online channels. On your social media, you can ask. Ask your email list if they'd like to join your SMS list. Just remember, you want to set clear expectations as to what it is you're sending and how often you'll be sending. Last but not least, you want to make sure you're bringing value to your messages to provide a great experience. Again, don't just send promotion after promotion. That's not the best way to engage your audience and actually keep people on your list. So we've got a great checklist that we're going to be sharing in the chat window today. We'll also share it in the follow-up email. But Dave, before we get to the questions, any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate again, and I've seen some questions coming through already, right, where people are asking, all right, I'm using Constant Contact for email. Is switching to SMS going to be different? And it's really not a question about switching, right? It's a question about using all of these channels together and using them in a way that's going to most benefit and support what it is that you're trying to do, and leaning into the strengths of each of them. And so that's the big thing I just want to leave people with here today, is that yes, there are going to be times where, depending on what it is that you're trying to do and the goal of your particular message, that one channel may be more appropriate than the other, right? But when you're thinking about an overall campaign and how you're trying to stay in front of people, and again, keep your business top of mind throughout, right, in order to get them to take some type of action, it's right, how do you use each of these channels, social, email, SMS, on a device that people have with them all the time, right? How do you use that in a way to keep your business top of mind, use those strengths to provide this really nice experience and unique thing for people that gives you more opportunities to do that, and then ultimately drive more engagement and sales. And that's really what I just want people to kind of leave here with today, is that, like, you don't have to have a plan on how to do anything with it, but just start to think like, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to use these things together to help and benefit my customers, which will in the end up benefiting my business. And I think if you can start there, you're going to come into this in a really good way that will have you seeing better results in the long term.
Yep, you've got to harness those strengths of each of these individual channels together. Great point. So I just want to let you all know, Constant Contact has so many great tools to help your small business, from websites, online stores, email, and social media, to help you all along the way. Plus the SMS tools that are launching very soon, which I know all of us internally are excited about, and I see a lot of you in the audience are excited about as well. So if you don't already have an account, you can sign up for a free trial. Just go to constantcontact.com or click the link that we will share in the chat window. Just to know, when we close out of the webinar today, a survey is going to pop up on your screen. There are 3 simple questions in there, and we'd love for you to tell us what you thought about the webinar today. But also in there, if you haven't already, let us know. If you want to learn when Constant Contact is launching these tools and all of the great details, be sure to fill that out and tell us yes or no if you want to receive those communications. Just a reminder, we have a lot of people joining us today. So there's a good chance we're probably not getting to all of these questions. And so we're going to do some follow-up work in order to get more of those questions answered. In the follow-up email, I'll provide a link to where those answers will be hosted on the community, and those will be answered in the coming business days. So lots of questions here, Dave. Let's dive in.
Steph, real quick before you get into that, I do want to ask a question or answer a question that I've been seeing here come up, and that Yeah, SMS is going to be an add-on to your existing Constant Contact accounts, and so you will need a Constant Contact account and to be able to use it, and it will be an add-on to your existing account, just to clarify that. And in terms of, I saw some questions about pricing. We're going to be having details about that information released soon. We don't have answers for you for that today. We just wanted to kind of whet your appetite a little bit about what the possibilities could be with SMS here today, but we will have details on that as well coming up in the summer.
Yep, we don't have that information
Sorry,
yet,
go on.
but no worries. We're all excitedly waiting for that information to be released once all the details have been finalized. So Lori sent me a message yesterday and wants to know, is it recommended that we test content on a smaller scale before sending to our entire list? And if so, what's a good test number?
That's a great question. I love that. Actually, that question is something that somebody's thinking about, Lori. So kudos to you. Testing is something that you always want to do, right? I think, one of the things that I often say is that, like, everything that we've said to you here today, or anytime I'm giving people advice, is like the real answer is it depends. And I know it's not a very satisfactory answer, but it really depends on your business, your audience, and what is right for you to do. And the only way you start to figure that out, right? These best practices are places to start so that you can test to see what's right and see if you can do something to get a better result, right? And so, yes, I would say yes, as with all your marketing, you should be thinking of ways that how can we do this versus that, and what's the difference and what is the outcome there. And then, typically, I know when we're thinking a good number to test, right? Well, so when we start thinking about, in order to be like kind of statistically relevant, like I know when we're thinking about like A/B testing for email, for example, right, where we want you to have at least like 1,000 contacts, right? So you can kind of split up that and have like something that gives you a more valuable number, because if you only get two people and one person does this, one person does that, well, you're not really learning anything, right? And so 1,000 may be a good place to start. Maybe we're going to have and be releasing, our content team is going to be sharing a lot more resources and dive into some of this stuff. And so all of these questions that we may not be able to answer specifically today, stay tuned, because we'll be doing a lot more content to follow up and give you more specific answers to some of this stuff. But in terms of testing content and testing what you're doing at a smaller scale, absolutely do that across the board.
Definitely. So Joe asks, does Constant Contact come up with the content for the message sent in the SMS feature? I'll let you start.
Yeah, so this is a twofold answer, right? And so we're going to make sure that the things that need to be in your message legally are in that message, right? And so that's the, reply stop and the links to things or different things that need to be in the messages legally. But you need to come up with the content that you're actually going to send to those people. That said, of course, as I mentioned, our content team and some of the tips, like we'll be providing you with some ideas, tips, and examples and things like that, that hopefully you can copy and modify and use for your business as well. But ultimately, you'll be writing what the content of that message is.
Awesome. Great answer there. So Jeremy has an interesting question. How do you remove the fear of a phishing link in a text? Emails can be scrubbed by a firewall service or email screening software. Do you want to start with that?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't know if I have. I would start with a couple of things, but I don't know if that's not my area of expertise, and so I don't want to steer anybody in the wrong way. I mean, I think that probably fear always exists, but again, this is where you get into that world where you're having people opt in, and so you're sending from you're a recognized sender, you're having them add you to the contacts, and so you start to know that they trust. Again, it's all about that trust, that they know that who they're receiving that information from. And of course, the stuff in your account, this is why we always recommend you're having a strong password. This is why we have, multiple users in your accounts now, that you can, set the levels of those types of things just from an email perspective. All of that stuff, two-factor, you have to be cognizant of those things on the security side. And I would say the same thing here. Right? You want to make sure that you're, again, making sure that people are opting in and doing those things. And you're doing that, and not only for your own safety, but for the safety of your subscribers and the people that are connected to your business.
And I would say this also goes back to that tip where we talked about you want to make sure you're sending at least once a month. Because if you're waiting in between that time, people are getting new phone numbers and they're completely forgetting about you because you're not there in their message inbox reminding them about who you are. So there's probably going to be a little more fear if you were to wait more than a month to send those messages. So it's all about building those relationships and the opt-in process that we've talked about throughout today.
Real quick, Steph, I just saw a question from Joe come in. Is this live? Yes, this is live.
Yes.
We are here right now talking with you. So I unfortunately don't have a newspaper that I can hold up that shows you the actual date, but it is live. Good to see you,
Yes.
Joe.
So I see a few people are asking about how the phone number is set up. Are we using our own number or one that's provided by Constant Contact? And so what I know about this service so far is it's going to be a long code number, and it's going to be something when you go in to set up and provide your information for the texting service, that's the number that you'll get in the return.
Yeah, and so just to talk a little bit about that, this is a little bit different from, so if anybody's familiar with our text to join tool, right, which I think somebody mentioned a little early in the questions too, where that's a service where people actually send a text messages in order to join your email list. So it's actually not a text messaging service, but in that situation, that is a situation where everybody uses the same number, but everybody's got a unique code that's associated with their list, right? What's going to happen here with the text messaging stand, and you mentioned the long code, which basically means you're going to get a phone number, right? That is 10 digits that is unique to you and your business that people are going to be able to, actually, you'll be able to send those messages from, right? So you'll have a unique number to do that.
Great. So Deb asks, do you have a rough guideline that would recommend how often we should text? So we've talked about the once a month, but maybe let's talk about how we think about sending more than once a month, because obviously you can do that. And we've seen that the more you can communicate, if you're doing it right, obviously, you're going to be able to get in front of people and also build those relationships. So when someone is ready to buy, they're more likely to think of you in that scenario. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, so I think this was again one of those things where it depends, right? You really need to think about your business and what is your relationship with your audience and what is the nature of your business in relation to that audience, right? So, it could mean, 3 text messages a month, or it could mean, much more than that. And it really just depends on that. And so I think, this is probably a good indicator for us to think of some ways that we can make some type of like chart or Venn diagram for like figuring out how many that you actually want to be sending for your particular business. But it really does boil down to that and really thinking about, I think it's a good idea. Maybe if you have a small team or have a partner or whatever with your business, or even if you've got a business group, right? Like get together with them and talk about and start to brainstorm some ideas before you even get started with this, because then it will give you a sense of like, all right, if I want to execute on this kind of idea that I think could be really cool that I want to do, I would need to send about this many messages. And so you kind of come in with that idea. And so you kind of know where you're going to be starting rather than kind of like locking yourself into something potentially where you're like, oh no, that's not what I want to do, or whatever the case may be. So I kind of come in with some ideas to start.
And I'll provide a more kind of extreme scenario, but think about this. Let's say you're a business that offers a daily coupon or a daily deal on some sort of product. If people are actually signing up for your daily deal text messages, that's how much you'd want to be sending. So it's all about kind of setting their expectations up front too on what your business is about and what exactly it is you're sending. I know it's extreme scenario and not everybody's going to do that, but maybe someone out there is going to. So I see we're a little bit past the top of the hour. I do want to be respectful of everyone's time today. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being here and providing all this great information alongside me. Again, take
Sure, I love
that.
it. And
Go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you for everyone joining us today, and I hope you're all excited about this new thing that we're going to have for Constant Contact as much as we are, because we think this is a really valuable channel for sure.
Yes, and I want to thank you all in the audience for participating, sending your questions. Keep an eye out for that recording. It will go out a little bit later today in an email along with some resources where we'll be answering more questions in the coming days. So thank you all for attending, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye now.
Bye all.